Hello and welcome back to another episode of Go FUD Yourself. Patrick, you're gonna have to turn down your Twitter, please. JD Gagnon here, and today I am joined with a good friend of mine, Mr. Patrick Kiefer. How you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, man. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining again. Just a quick acknowledgement / apology for last week. I am in Canada this week and last week, somewhat unexpectedly. So we had a bit of a challenge juggling some guests and stuff, and we missed a couple of days last week. So apologies for that. We are, in fact, a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We're on all the different venues, and make sure you like, share, subscribe, help us get the word out there. Just doing it as a service to help keep people informed and share some love, and hopefully keep people away from too much FOMO and too much FUD, and we can try to navigate this space together. Evie, hello, my friend. Good to see you again. Anyways, all right, so we can probably jump into what we're talking about today. We have a bunch of that I know Patrick is super excited to talk about, like the metaverse, and some AI enthusiasts and how they are making some moves in the metaverse. Definitely have some important thoughts about that. JP Morgan enters into the RWA tokenization space, so we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about Coinbase challenge to the SEC, and some appeal dropping. We'll talk about the U.S. government being a crypto whale. It's kind of interesting. And of course, it wouldn't be a week without talking about Friendtech and a few others. And then I think lastly, if we get to it, we're going to talk a little bit about Ferrari, and how it's going to start accepting crypto payments, which I'm really, really excited about, because I definitely can't afford a Ferrari at the moment. But at some point, I can pay crypto for a Ferrari, which is exciting. Anyways, all right. So, Patrick, any quick thoughts before we play the song and get going?
No, let's jump in.
All right, buddy. We will do it. I just got to change my sound for a second. And here we go. All right, I'm using a different computer today, obviously, than normal. And I have no idea if our friends on Twitter could hear that, but I hope you could hear the song. I'm not sure if it worked as well.
Was it a new song? Did you change the soundtrack? No.
Oh yeah. So you did hear a little bit of it. Yeah, it was a new song they made. We've got like 5 or 6 of them. We did a on FU Friday, not this last Friday, but the one before. We did something funny, and then they made this.
In the vast and mysterious cryptoverse, there is one ghoul that financially.
So it's just a little creepy Gary Gensler. So I thought I would play it again just for fun. All right. So Patrick is obviously a partner of mine on a lot of things, a whole bunch of fun stuff we're working on. But you do some pretty cool options work, Patrick. Do you want to just tell everybody about that quickly before we?
Yeah, of course. So I'm co-founder of Arrow Markets. We're building an options trading platform on Avalanche. We're currently live on testnet, and we're going to be rolling out our V2 on mainnet later this fall. We have a trading competition coming up so that users can kind of experience what it would be like to use the V2. That should be launching in a couple weeks. So check out our Twitter at Arrow Markets for updates about that trading contest. I also have a Substack. You can find, if you go to my Twitter, 0xprotean.
Beauty. Thanks, brother. All right. So we're going to jump right into it and start talking a little bit about AI and the metaverse. So I'll set this one up, and then we can get your intelligent perspective on this. But I've been somewhat of a critic of Decentraland and Sandbox and some of the kind of existing metaverse projects. It was a lot of bark and very little bite, at least during last cycle. And we saw, up until about 2 weeks ago, Facebook really had some mud on their face too, because they had spent something like $100 billion or something insane, developing their metaverse, which up until like a couple of weeks ago, the only examples that anybody had really seen were a really crappy cartoon version of Zuck in front of the Eiffel Tower. And it was like just really disappointing. But then they came out with this thing now where he did that interview with Lex Friedman. Did you see that?
I did not see the interview, but I saw that he did it in the metaverse. Yeah.
Like it was hyper realistic. Like it was really cool, actually. So all of a sudden, they've redeemed themselves a little bit. At least Facebook has. The challenge with these other groups like Decentraland and Sandbox and so on is, at the time we thought they raised a lot of money, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million. But that's a rounding error compared to what Facebook has spent and others have spent. And I just think we're a long ways away from the metaverse that we all think we're going to get. But instead we're getting, steps in that direction. So have you played around with Decentraland or any of the metaverse platforms, Patrick?
I have not.
Okay. Yeah. I have a couple of times. You're not missing much. It's not at the point yet where it's really like a mass adoption type technology. A couple of days ago, I took a few members of our team and we went to this place called Zero Latency, and it's like a VR shooting simulation, but you walk around in the room, like you've got the goggles on, you can't see anything, and it's in this like big rectangle room, but you're like walking through like towers and going upstairs and all this weird shit, but actually all you're doing is walking in like a 20 foot by 20 foot radius. It's super cool, and it was very realistic. The VR was very realistic. It's just the metaverse is a totally different dimension of what this looks like. And Decentraland and Sandbox and so on have been, at least for me, not that exciting, not that interesting. But anyways, we've got Sophiaverse, which is an AI crypto project that is now starting to sell AI-generated wearables for your avatars in the metaverse. So that one thing that people have complained about a lot with Decentraland and Sandbox is that they've got these avatars that are like kind of boring and not that, you can't personalize them, that much. Now there's AI generated wearables for these avatars, and that's what this is all about. It's been getting quite a bit of hype, I suppose, in the space, because we haven't heard much coming out of the metaverse in a while. Can you see yourself, Patrick? Again, you're kind of like me, I think, probably outside the early adopters of this type of technology. Can you see yourself using metaverse in any way? Like, is it in the foreseeable future?
I mean, I like you kind of alluded to at the beginning, it's not something I have my finger on the pulse of, the most recent kind of innovations, but I do think that I think it's almost inevitable that there will be more and more metaverse-like products that help businesses, teams within businesses communicate. So even just very simple things we use. I mean, honestly, even something like Discord, but I think a better example is maybe GatherTown. I'm not sure if you guys use GatherTown at RBL or something.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
and these actually do help with productivity and kind of building community among teams. And so my guess is this type of productivity software will kind of begin to include more and more metaverse-y type features. And I certainly could participate in that. I mean, just in the same way that we use GatherTown for my company, I think using some of these more metaverse style productivity tools is not out of the question. That I will say it is interesting. I mean, Facebook, to your point about Facebook put an enormous amount of money into the metaverse research a couple of years ago, and their stock took an enormous hit, if you remember. And then Zuck announced essentially, I don't know if it was a pivot, but it was a significant pullback in terms of the amount of money that they were going to invest in this. And their stock price recovered as they kind of backed away from that very intense pressure on the metaverse. So it's kind of ironic that now that they've kind of backed off a little bit, some of it's starting to pick up. But yeah, like I said, I think that there is a role for this in productivity tools that help teams coordinate, especially remote workers, teams that aren't working in the same office. And I could see myself using those.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited for the time when we have like a full body wearable that you put on, and the sensations are all the same as if you were actually experiencing that. That'd be kind of cool. I mean, one of the biggest criticisms I've had of Decentraland and Sandbox and the like is the way that they tried to create some economics around the value of metaverse land or space, so to speak. I think it'll be interesting to watch how that kind of evolves. Again, my criticism is born out of there's an infinite amount of metaspace or metaverse space land. So trying to create scarcity and like $90,000 per plot or something, or what it was originally when everybody was getting all excited about this, I just think is not sustainable. It's not scalable. Now, Facebook, on the other hand, will probably approach it completely differently, which I think will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how different, approaches to this evolve. But definitely excited to see kind of where it goes. I don't know. For me, I just don't understand it well enough. It's not something that I'm like super into. So I guess it's kind of lost on me a little bit.
I think one thing that's interesting is I could just say really quickly that, with the social fi phenomena that's happening right now, things like FinTech, I could see that being something like that being a way to generate scarcity in the metaverse, like proximity to people, easy, access to people who already have a reputation outside the metaverse. And if somehow, real estate in the metaverse could be associated with, the closer you are to someone who has a reputation, the easier it is to communicate with them or do business with them or something. Now you can start thinking about what scarcity means in the metaverse. But again, like you're saying, this is kind of outside of my realm of expertise. So it's hard for me to predict kind of where things are going here.
I just love shitting on the metaverse, which is why we got to talk about it today. Okay. Well, we can definitely come back. I mean, I've got tons of thoughts on the metaverse, but we can move on and come back to that another day. We'll jump over now, I think, a little bit more to what is in your wheelhouse a little bit. And JP Morgan came out with some pretty interesting announcements, I suppose, over the last little bit. So JP Morgan conducted its first live blockchain-based collateral settlement transaction. So essentially, they used the closed blockchain Onyx, which is one that JP Morgan, Goldman, and Microsoft are building together. There's others that are participating. So they're calling it tokenized collateral network, and it's a partnership with BlackRock and Barclays. So it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of neat movement here coming from some of the incumbents who, up until not that long ago, were fairly strongly against digital assets and any application of blockchain in the future, and so on and so forth. And now that tide seems to have turned. So it's kind of exciting, I think, seeing anything with Barclays, BlackRock, JP Morgan, testing something out, proving a concept, and obviously it worked. That's really exciting. Any thoughts on this one? Like, I mean, we've been talking about this for years, but do you think this is the beginning of the wave, Patrick?
I don't know if it's the beginning of the wave, but it's certainly another kind of incremental step in the direction of institutional adoption. I do feel like we have seen a fair amount of these kind of smaller announcements about progress that has been made by the institutions, and kind of nothing has led to the floodgates actually opening. I was speaking with someone else on a call last week, and they were referring to the mass institutional adoption narrative as mythical, was the word that they were using. And in fact, they had kind of centered a business on facilitating mass institutional adoption a few years ago, and had to wind down the business because the floodgates just still haven't opened. So I think this is an important incremental step in the right direction. I still think there's kind of a long way to go, but I do think there are obvious things that the technology can do that can help, even just in traditional finance infrastructure. So very low cost instant settlement, very kind of flexible collateral solutions, programmatic unlocking of collateral. You can, in fact, even enforce collateral requirements by just basically putting the right types of holds on an account. You don't even have to actually transfer the funds to another account and lock them up. You can just kind of programmatically put the right type of hold on the existing account. So it's extremely flexible and cost effective in terms of collateralization. So I think, like I said, this is an important incremental step. It's not surprising, but I don't think it is kind of a harbinger that the floodgates are about to open.
Yeah, I hope that it's the leading indicator that the floodgates are about to open, but I feel like it's that we're maybe not quite there yet. Something else that came up in this article, and it's kind of seems unrelated, but I'm never going to pass up an opportunity to point my finger a little bit at SBF. But Carolyn Ellison, who was his girlfriend and partner, she was co-CEO for a while and a whole bunch of shit, has testified now that under his direction, she committed fraud. So I think it's not looking so rosy for SBF. He was his lawyers made a request yesterday. I don't know if you saw this. His lawyers made a request for slow-acting Adderall so that he could focus during his trial, because I guess they must have cut him off the Adderall supply when he's in jail. I don't know. Anyways, I'm smiling. I don't like to make fun of other people suffering. I just think it's some silver lining, I suppose, to all the people that have been burned, that for once someone's actually maybe having to face the consequences of their actions. So anyways,
yeah,
all right.
I mean, Caroline Ellison, but also there was another guy. I don't remember his name. I could guess his name, but
I can see his face. I just can't remember his name.
But he was kind of doing the same thing. I mean, he was saying, look, I'm guilty of committing X, Y, and Z, but I did it at the behest of SBF. So I agree. It's not looking good for him.
This happens a lot, obviously. They try to get these big fish, so to speak, and then they throw charges at all of their co-conspirators and will drop the charges if they all flip and testify. And that's how they build these cases against these people. And so, I mean, from a pure survival bias perspective, I mean, everybody's going to try to turn on you. In theory, it's an age-old prisoner's dilemma, right? You're better off if nobody talks, but that's then banking on the other person not talking. And they're better off if they do talk individually. As a group, you're all better off if none of you talk. But individually, you're better off if you talk. And so what happens is everybody talks, generally speaking. And so, yeah. Anyways, we can move on from that one. It's kind of ridiculous that we're still talking about it, but it is capturing most of the mind share in the crypto space at the moment. Okay, another thing that we talk about a lot is lawsuits involving the SEC, and one that I talk quite a bit about is specifically Coinbase and the SEC, and some of the things that they're trying to fight for, at least from a Coinbase perspective, to, I think, save their own asset first and potentially protect the crypto space a little bit. But essentially what happened recently is Coinbase has actually demanded that the SEC clarify how it plans to apply securities laws to digital assets. So actually come out with, some sort of documentation around their views on things, so that even if we don't agree with them, at least we know what they are. That's the problem right now, is no one really knows what and how they're approaching it, what parts of the securities laws are being applied. I mean, Gensler's going to say all of them, but we know that that's not possible. So that was one of their big claims. They were actually also talking about the SEC initiating enforcement without explaining any of the principles. Effectively, they're just looking for the SEC here to be slapped on the wrist, I suppose. What are your thoughts on this one? Have you followed this very much?
I've followed it a little bit. I think obviously this is relevant for some of the things that we talk about. I think the more clarity we can get, the sooner the better, because there's essentially, from the standpoint of user welfare, there's money being left on the table by the fact that we don't have clear regulatory understanding of what it takes to tokenize securities, to be able to kind of use securities in these composable applications. If you think about the types of workflows, programmable workflows that are available for non-security tokens in the DeFi space, there's just a huge amount of, like I said, money being left on the table from the standpoint of user welfare, because of the fact that users can't plug into those types of composable workflows for registered securities. And so the sooner we can get that clarity, the better. And I think the better off the users will be. I think it's better for market health. I mean, there are things, that price discovery that can improve with certain types of workflows that actually can't be replicated outside of Web3, like flash loans, for example. So I think there's a lot that's being held back in terms of market health, in terms of user welfare, because of the fact that there isn't clarity about how to regulate tokenized security. So I think it's good to push on that.
Yeah. Paul Gruel, I think summed this up really nice. I don't know his official title, so I hate to butcher it, but I believe he's the chief lawyer at Coinbase. And he summed it up pretty nicely. He's saying what's happening right now is the SEC is demanding that digital asset firms register or be sued, but it still refuses to write the rules articulating when the SEC believes registration is required. So they're saying you must register, but we're not going to tell you when you have to and what requirements there are when you've met the requirements for needing to register. So it's a really interesting, obviously I've been a very vocal critic of this, but they just need to figure this the hell out. These lawsuits are frivolous. It's a waste of money. What this tells all of us is that we need a solution. So instead of fighting over, something that's not going to work in the future anyways, let's just start working on what will work. And that is finding meaningful regulation. All right. One other thing regarding the SEC is with respect to the appeal that Grayscale, or that they were going to make on the Grayscale decision. So what had happened was a judge had, this is a couple of weeks ago now, a judge had deemed their denial, I suppose, of the Grayscale ETF application as problematic because they didn't provide meaningful explanations as to why and what had to be remedied to rectify it and get to approval. And so the SEC had claimed that they were going to appeal that. It seems now that they're dropping the appeal, that they've dropped the appeal, which would lead you to believe that they probably felt they didn't have substantial evidence to fight it, or whatever the case was. And so speculation now is that that should be paving the path in many ways for the Grayscale Bitcoin ETF to be hopefully approved, or the transition from it being a fund to it being an ETF, I think is probably more likely now than ever before. So that's exciting. Any thoughts on Grayscale and ETFs? I know obviously you're a fan of this as well, but.
Yeah, I think it would be great if we can get some of these approved. And yeah, my understanding was there was a deadline for the SEC to essentially continue the case versus drop it basically. And that deadline was on Friday, and they didn't file an appeal. So that is kind of implicitly good news.
It's funny that the headline was that they dropped the appeal, which I think is funny. In fact, they just
implicitly
they let the time to appeal expire. But anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
Look, we've talked about this before. I do think the incentives are kind of all wrong at the SEC, at least for the mid-level enforcement divisions. It's a lot of kind of lawyers that are looking to make a name for themselves. They're looking to kind of make a career for themselves by making an example of basically anyone they can find that violates some interpretation of some enforcement that the SEC has done in the past. So they're very much not incentivized to make the regulations clear, especially in markets like this, new markets. That being said, so I think the incentives are all wrong kind of at the mid-level of the SEC. That being said, I haven't ruled out that Gary Gensler has a master plan. We've talked about this before. There's some chance that he's playing 3D chess and he kind of knows that a bunch of these things are going to fail ahead of time. And he wants to rack up some of these failures so he can go to Congress and say, look, I need some sweeping authority to overhaul the regulation of all of these markets. So, and frankly, if he was doing that, then he would be one of the only people at the SEC who's actually doing what the agency is supposed to be doing. But it's very hard to read. I'm not sure if that's what he's doing. Of course, if that's what he's doing, then probably the regulation that he's going to come back with, if he goes to Congress, is going to be more draconian than we'd like. But so like I said, I think the incentives are all wrong at the mid-level. A lot of these lawsuits are coming out of kind of the mid-level. And at the top, it's hard to read what Gensler is doing. There's a chance that this is part of his plan. There's another chance that he's just kind of flailing. I can't tell which one.
I hope he's flailing, because if this is part of his plan and things are going according, it's going to be a lot less exciting than we're hoping for. Okay, we'll talk a lot more about the SEC later in the week, of course. But still sticking to the U.S. government, this is kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought about this. I tried to look for a little bit more information since this came out. But right now, the U.S. government is actually one of the largest Bitcoin holders, or if not the largest Bitcoin holder, other than maybe Satoshi globally, which is kind of interesting considering how much hate the U.S. government has had for Bitcoin for quite some time. Now, what's interesting about this is they're claiming that this is a really good case study for other governments. So this is very much from the perspective of crypto positive authors, for sure. But what they're speculating now is that this is a really good example of what happens when you just buy and hold, when you don't care about the price fluctuations, when you're just accumulating an asset, hold it, and see what happens over a long time horizon. The U.S. government can show that you're probably way better off than any of the funds that actively traded in, et cetera. So what's interesting here, though, is how did they get all this Bitcoin? And that's what I was trying to find, is where did this all come from? Did they go and buy it? Did they OTC it? Have they been accumulating? A lot of it's been seizures and different things. But often when they seize assets, they auction them. So I'm not sure if this is just a temporary hold on all these Bitcoin or what the deal is. But either way, I thought it was kind of interesting. Thought we'd talk about it.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this before today? I hadn't heard of it.
I hadn't heard that they're one of the largest Bitcoin holders. I had heard that they do own a substantial amount of Bitcoin as a result of seizures. The Treasury Department is holding Bitcoin from a variety of different seizures in criminal cases. And
but don't they eventually sell it?
I don't know. My guess is that's, if not all of it, that's almost all of it. I would be very surprised if there was some, program within the Treasury or within the government mandated to buy Bitcoin. It's very, very unlikely. I think it
would be surprising that we hadn't heard of it until now, if that was the case. But I mean, if anybody listening has any insight on this, send us a note, send us a message, or I don't know, comment on the video or something. Because it'd be interesting to know if they actually have had any programmatic purchases. I think that would be hugely bullish for the space and for the future of regulation in the U.S. But anyways, a couple of things. We're going to talk about FriendTech today, but we're bumping up on time, so we'll end on a positive note that one of my favorite car brands, Ferrari, has now taken a page out of Elon's book and decided to accept cryptocurrency payments for its vehicles. First starting in the US and then moving over to Europe and so on. This is exciting for me because I think it's a different chunk of society, I think, that is now starting to adopt. Luxury car brands, a lot of the big luxury brands, big institutions, they're very slow. Today we've talked about, JP Morgan, Goldman, Barclays, BlackRock making moves, and now it's nice to see Ferrari, guys that generally won't jump onto something until they're pretty sure, that it's here to stay and that it adds value. And we're seeing a lot of this. We're seeing a lot of high-end fashion brands and different things starting to accept crypto. Crypto is a accepted form of payment for real estate in many countries. So yeah, I think this to me is just another kind of signal that even the old luxury brands are starting to, adopt cryptocurrency for some of its benefits, and realizing that there's enough demand, especially from higher net worth people. This is an asset class, obviously, that Ferrari drivers seem to hold. So hopefully the fact that I love Ferrari and that I'm in crypto, maybe that foreshadows that I'm going to have a Ferrari paid for by crypto someday, but got to get back to work if that's going to happen.
What's interesting is, it said that they did it in response to requests from clients. So they were getting feedback from people that they wanted to pay in crypto, which is, if I had to guess, I would have guessed if there were very wealthy crypto people clamoring for any particular car, I would have guessed a Lambo.
But the people that want Lambos don't often have the resources to buy a Lambo. A Lambo is all bark. I love Lambo, by the way. So I'm kind of talking shit about it, but I'm a big Lambo fan. But Ferrari really is in my opinion, it's kind of the, short of like Bugatti or Pagani or something, it's kind of the pinnacle of luxury sports cars, I think. So I don't know. I'm a big fan of this anyways. I'm a huge Ferrari fan, so this is exciting for me. Although I hate red, so it's got to be a color other than red. Anyways, all right. So Patrick, thank you, my friend, for joining for another episode of Go FUD Yourself. Reminder for everybody, we are a live show still, Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We're on all the major venues. Please help us get the word out, like, share, subscribe, add us to bookmarks and all that crap on Twitter, please, if you don't mind. Live comments come to us. We didn't have any today. But if you post a comment and it's really insulting or like super bad, we'll probably read it on the air. So make sure you try to insult and say some bad stuff to us. Other than that, have a great week, everybody. And with that, today I say to you, Patrick, go FUD yourself. Later.